freedom time.
Now free your mind.
Now free your mind.
Wake it up.
Wake it up.
Wake it up.
Wake it up.
It's freedom time.
It's freedom time.
It's freedom time.
It's freedom time.
Hey yo.
Hey yo.
Wake it up.
Wake it up.
It's freedom time.
It's freedom time.
Now free your mind.
Now free your mind.
All right. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you to the incredible staff of the International Festival of Arts and Ideas for having us here today. I'm Jennifer Harrison Newman, Associate Artistic Director at the Schwarzman Center just down the road, and it is my honor and pleasure to be in conversation today with the Monique Martin. So thank you all for being here tonight. So I'd love to just start this conversation tonight with, let's just go back in time to where your journey began. We heard these wonderful testimonials to how you have touched many people's lives across sectors, across organizations, artists, programmers, curators, founders. So I'd love to go back in time. So where did it all begin for you? Where did this life in the arts start?
I will thank you so much for having me. 2025 Visionary Leadership Award. I didn't know any of this was happening, so I'm looking backstage. Like, where did they get those videos from, and where did they record that? So I'm just overwhelmed and feeling a wash of support and love. I'm gonna put the L word in the room. Yes.
Love, yes.
And I'll start with love and family. I grew up in Berkeley, California. Then we moved to Oakland, California. And I will say that we share this, Cali girls. I will say that I grew up in a very religious family. And so we were kind of insulated. And I had my first early producing Bible plays. So I will say that my Good Samaritan story was really Drama Desk or maybe even Tony Award winning. So there's something about growing up in a community, whatever that community or however that community is defined, where you feel seen, you feel safe, you feel supported. And that was the community that I grew up in. My parents also were lovers of the arts. My father was a amateur musician, so we had a piano in the house. He could whistle, he could sing, and loved jazz. My mom loved theater, so we would go to San Francisco and see everything that came through San Francisco, from Color Girls to Timbuktu to Chorus, everything that came through. So we had a rich upbringing and introduction to the arts that also included going to library performances and going to park performances, and also Fisherman's Wharf, where you would see mime and circus and non-traditional theater. So the range of art and culture that we were introduced to really seeded the foundation for my love of art and my understanding of the value of art and culture.
Yeah, and the kind of like can exist in so many different places and forms. It's not just one space. You don't enter the theater for it all the time. You can enter it on the wharf. You can walk down the street and pass by it, right? So that sort of indoctrination, I would say, of art everywhere for you is present. So if we can talk about and also we were backstage talking a lot. And you mentioned your mother's, the laundromat, and your mother's sort of holding that. And I'm going to use the word curator. So can you talk a little bit about that space, then what role it played in the community?
Yes. One thing I shared with Jennifer is creating this piece is the first time that I've ever defined myself as an artist, for a lot of reasons, primarily because I am really good at being a doula to other people's projects. Like, I can take you from ideation all the way to production. But this project, Minty Fresh, just kept talking to me, and so I couldn't silence it even when I tried to. So the idea that art can happen anywhere, there was this kind of democratic approach to where art could happen. So even if we went to see the opera, or we went to see the ballet, or went to see some fabulous jazz musician in an opera house or in that kind of setting, and we had to get dressed up, there wasn't a hierarchical approach to that. It was like, okay, now this is what you wear when you go here, but it wasn't oppressive, right? So that also was a foundational aspect and kind of portal that I could walk through.
Yeah. So if we think about your first work, you talked about the plays, the Bible plays, and then as let's say, fast forward to professionalism, the first job that you had was as a stage manager, right? So you
Yes.
entered in the work, like as you're saying, as a doula of other people's work, holding it, shepherding it, and you started as a stage manager. Can we talk a little bit about your path from stage management, operations, into curating and programming and producing as well?
Yes, and I do want to pick up on the laundromat because I kind of lost that
Yeah.
thread a little bit. That I say that it was a community center where you could do laundry, because although it was a laundromat, we had wash and fold before that was really even a thing. And my mom sold Avon. She did alterations. She made clothes. We had a snack bar. We had video games. We had a television. And this was in the height of the crack era in East Oakland, California. So it was a safe space for the community. It was a place where you could, of course, do your laundry, but it also was a space for gathering. Like parents would come looking for their children there. And then we all had micro businesses within that, so it also taught us entrepreneurship. So my sister sewed blondies, I did clothes, my brother did icy so he could pay for basketball camp. And so this idea of, I think about 10 or 15 years ago, there was this term placemaking that was so big in the arts. Like, how are you making a place? And all the funding, a lot of the funding was going towards placemaking, and how are you defining your community? And so that was an early example of placemaking.
For sure. You were
Yes.
producing very early.
Yes,
Your mother was a
yes.
producer too.
Right. And
Yeah.
I did, I studied journalism in college and decided that that was the direction I was going in. And after a couple of internships, that wasn't for me. I was not interested in doing hard journalism, and I wasn't interested in reading a teleprompter. So I thought, well, maybe I'm going to be an actress. I went to ACT and took classes at ACT, and decided quickly that acting was definitely not my calling or my skill. And I kept my eye on the stage manager, and being the firstborn of six, I was like, the stage manager has a little bit of power. The stage manager has some agency, and that's what I moved to New York to do, is to work as a stage
You've
manager.
been stage managing your siblings probably your whole
Absolutely.
life.
Right. Herding cats.
Yes, exactly. So if we think about, so from stage management, was that Summer Stage? Was that your first?
No, it was before
Okay.
Summer Stage.
Okay.
Yeah. It was really theater.
All right. So take us to Summer Stage, which is a festival vibe, right?
Yes.
So you're in festival mode, you're moving things around. Talk a little bit about Summer Stage and your role there, and what were you doing there?
Summer Stage is still one of my favorite festivals in New York City. And that is because Summer Stage takes place in Central Park. However, the mission of the organization is to bring art and culture to the five boroughs. So the programming that we do, which often gets overshadowed because Central Park is so fabulous and everyone wants to be there, including sponsors. But when you think about the tapestry of New York, and to be able to go to the South Bronx and introduce work to that community, which might be different than the community in East New York. So it helped me to really think about programming through a different lens, and to meet the audience. I like to say meet the audience where they are, but then take them someplace where they didn't expect to go or didn't think they wanted to go.
Amazing. Okay, so we've moved from sort of stage management into producing and curating, right, for different communities, and then you found yourself into creative producing. So can we describe what creative producing is for you?
Creative producing is looking at coming from an idea. So most presenters, a lot of presenters, present what is already on tour. So that has been ideated it's been marinated, it's been baked
Rehearsed, it's
and
like, it's a thing.
kitchen test kitchen, all of the things, and then it's on tour, right? That is one way to present, and you get a lot of amazing art through that pathway. And then there is talking to an artist that says, you know, I've always wanted to do something with the mariachi band, or I've always wanted to work with a harpist. That's the kind of project that I get really excited about, is identifying, or I'll say, have you ever met so-and-so? Oh, I really wanted to do a piece that had to do about a certain subject. And so to bring that together, that's the curatorial process that I enjoy and that I've been really excited and
Sort of
successful at.
matchmaking. You start matchmaking ideas and people and humans, and you're helping to usher the project into an existence.
Right.
But it's never been done before. It's brand new. There's lots of questions and discovery periods, right?
Yeah. And you also match make the venue, because not every work is suitable for every venue. So it's also thinking about my colleagues and what are they programming in their venues, and this artist might be better suited for them than even the venue or the organization that I'm working with.
Yeah, so we were also talking a bit about how when you're taking a new project, it can't all be done in one place because the time that's required, the humans that are required, and so you have to find different places to make it happen. And I think Minty Fresh is a great example of something that from your idea and how it was built. But we'll get to that. First, I want to ask the vision for Minty Fresh. And you were saying it was sort of ideating with you for a while. Where did this start to grow for you? What was the missing links that you were putting together? Can you share that with
Yeah.
us?
You know, I never thought that the artists that my family introduced us to, going to Fisherman's Wharf, the Mime, Pickle Family Circus, and all of those street performers would really seed this idea of the way circus exists in so many different spaces. There's not, it could be in a tent, it could be in this theater, it could be outdoors. So I was invited to the Montreal Circus Festival. Complete Mon Circuit happens every July in Montreal. It's the largest contemporary circus festival in North America. It's amazing. So I was invited there. We had already had a partnership with the Quebec government to present Canada Day. We did a couple of Canadian music. And so the program officer from the consulate asked me, would you like to attend this festival? And I would say, Montreal, yes. And that is where I met Mary Lou Oleski, fun fact.
Yep.
Yes, and they were interested, the festival producers were interested in, because it's so international, there's people that come from all over the world and they never come to the States. They go to Montreal and then they go back to Finland or wherever they're coming from. And the festival producers wanted to find partnerships for the States. So we were part of a cohort that were invited there, and they were making the Michael Jackson Cirque du Soleil show at the time. So that was super, super exciting. So on the campus, there is Tohu, which is a circus presenting venue, and then there's the National Circus School, and then there's Cirque du Soleil. So there's all
in
of
one
this
hub.
circus, you know, kind of village that happens there. And that was my first kind of immersion into the range, from a one-person show to a cabaret show, where they're dancing and doing acrobats on tables, to Cirque du Soleil as well. And on the flight back, and for any of you who have traveled to Montreal, it's like you go up and you come down. After being there for a week, the seed of the idea, I say, it was downloaded on me. I said, what would it look like to have a circus in the Underground Railroad, during the Underground Railroad, but not focus on the violence and all of the tyranny and torture that happened, that we have been, you know, inundated with those kinds of images. So what would be the upside down experience of being in that? What is the physicality? What is the risk? And that's where the idea
Amazing. And so I'm thinking about like what in your brain was like Underground Railroad and circus, and was it what I immediately think of is that in every space, no matter how horrific, there is these moments of joy, there is moments of laughter, there is moments of love, as you're saying, and how does that also exist simultaneously in these spaces? Can you talk a bit about like for you, do you remember how that popped into your brain?
And I have to say, again, I use the word download because I don't know where it came from, honestly. Honestly. And after I started to really think about it and play with it and nurture it a bit and do more research, because it's not that I had Harriet Tubman even as a muse at that time, right? Of course, the history of Harriet Tubman and everyone that was involved in the Underground Railroad is extraordinary. However, that wasn't top of mind, and there was nothing like that in the festival for sure. So it wasn't like I was inspired by something that I saw, but I think for me, the physicality that I witnessed with all of these incredible circus artists, and then to think about, I love Stranger Things, that show, and I love the beginning, how it turns the world upside down, and that's what I thought about with the Underground Railroad, is what would it look like turned upside down?
Okay, so we're in Minty Fresh in the Vision, and so we both use the word scaffolding, maybe in slightly different ways, but let's scaffold out. It's Minty Fresh. There are multiple strategies that you employ within this project called Minty Fresh to sort of illuminate the upside down. So we'll just call it the upside down, right? So you're using dramaturgy and history. You're using these elements of circus. And we can talk about what circus is. You're using music. You're using visuals. You're using costumes. You're using the physicality. So let's just talk about the strategies. Let's pull out some of the strategies. Let's start with like, what does circus mean to you when you use the word circus?
What I love about circus is it employs all of the art forms in performance that bring me joy. That is theater, that is dance, and that is dramatics. It's very dramatic. And I hadn't, again, before being invited to the festival there, really looked or participated in a lot of circus. When my son was young, we would see circus and Universal Circus or Ringling Brothers or any of those circus, but I always looked at it through the lens of this is for children. This is for young people. This is not serious. So to look at all of the elements that were possible and to think about it through a cultural lens of this time of the Underground Railroad, then how do I bring a cultural perspective into a genre that is really looked at as a white genre? When you look at it in this country, even though circus happens all over the world, it happens in Africa, it happens in Asia, it happens in South America, huge. So that was one of the things that got me excited, is how can I see, because at the same time, after attending that festival, I came back on fire to present it. So that the idea was downloaded and I started to do research on it, but then I put it away because it's like, well, that's not who I am. I'm a presenter. And so I spent the next couple of years convincing my boss at Summer Stage to expand our programming to include contemporary circus. So that was the first kind of immersion to really understand what does it take to present circus, how is circus made, where are they doing workshops, where do they even make circus? And so I was invited a lot around the world to Paris and France and Finland and other places to understand the range of circus. And then I started my first circus festival at Summer Stage in Marcus Garvey Park in Harlem with a company, racehorse company from Finland. And from there, I just continue to present circus every season with both international companies, and I always was very interested in US companies and to understand what is the difference? Why is a circus from Europe so different than the circus that's here in the States? And so that I became an advocate for it because a lot of the circuit, most of the circus in the States is woefully underfunded and also misunderstood.
Yeah, it's like you were getting your PhD in circus. You were really doing the deep dive, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so you're going around the world, but you're and learning more about circus. You are presenting it. So by presenting it, you're also learning a lot about it, right? You're
Absolutely.
like, what are the tech writers? What do they need? What you're learning all about circus arts, and you're in the meantime germinating this idea of your own circus in the back of your mind. So, what was the first? Let's just say the moment you said, okay, first you're saying it's not me, and then you're like, okay, maybe it is me. This moment of like, you're like, well, how did you open that door? What did that door look like? What was the first, okay, maybe it is me? Were you writing? Was it a rehearsal room?
I was doing research on Harriet Tubman, and I was doing research on the Underground Railroad. And then a moment came where I decided I don't want to begin this story in trauma. So we then went, and the story began in Africa. And I had this whole, oh, they're happy in Africa, and then they get captured. It was just like a Lifetime movie. It was horrible. And then they get captured, and there's the walk from the interior to the shore. And then I said, that's not the story. I don't want to start it there. So the journey for Minty Fresh begins in the transatlantic slave trade, that journey on the water. And for me, that is the birth for African Americans, is on the water. And that's where we start the journey, because that is the transformation that brought us from different tribes, desperate tribes that spoke different languages, had different customs, that were forced together. And then when you get on the shore of South Carolina, a lot of the captured folks thought they were back in Africa because it looked the same, right? So then you're on this new shore in this new country, and you're all together. So you have to then find ways to communicate with each other and become one. And that is where all of the different kind of iterations of how Minty Fresh evolved.
And
Yeah.
how much time were you giving yourself in that? I mean, how much time did you give yourself before you started to like actually go into a development process? You know, you were researching, you were learning more. What was the span of time?
You know, I am really fortunate and blessed that one of my dear friends, James Lemons, who is the executive artistic director of Lake Placid Center for the Arts, we were invited, along with a couple of other presenters, to Europe to learn about, the European Union gave us a grant to learn about circus, right? So we had spent time together, and one evening, you attend APAP. APAP is one of the largest conferences for producers and presenters that happens every January. And it's a marathon of shows and plenaries and all of the things, all of the things. And it was late night, and James and I and a couple of other colleagues were sitting at the Warwick Bar. And James asked me, whatever happened to that circus? And I was like, oh, I'm still, tinkling with it and working on it. And he says, what if I gave you a budget and a residency? And that's how it started. So I have to say, be kind to people. I would have never asked, because in my mind, I needed to have the work at a certain level to even ask for funding, to even ask for residency. And it was James who dropped the first seed. So to be, again, stepping into being an artist out of being a presenter and a curator, being at the residency in Lake Placid, which is stunning. I had never been to Lake Placid. It's absolutely beautiful with Adesla, co-choreographer, and Adesla didn't know much about circus, so we literally spent the first day or so looking at hip hop videos, and I was showing him circus videos. And that was the beginning to really learn about how can we mix these different ideas together in a show. And first I needed to introduce Adesla to circus. So we spent time looking at videos, and that was the beginning of the journey. And that
Amazing.
was 2018.
Okay, so you started with movement, it sounds
Yes,
like. And
yes.
what are the commonalities? What are the finding your own language of between hip hop? So there's a couple vernaculars, hip hop, circus vernaculars, and finding the commonalities and what was interesting to you. So if you're thinking about a circus that is rooted in, well, not even rooted, but starting on the Atlantic slave trade, then you're talking about specifically African American circus, specifically African American bodies. Can you talk about why that is unique, right? Because you mentioned universal, and particularly in the U.S., right? From a North American lens, why is an all-American, Black African American cast in circus specifically unique and important?
It is unique in that they just don't exist. And we've done a lot of research, and now, and I will retract that. They do exist. They're just small, and they serve their community. There's Circus Harmony in East St. Louis. There is Prescott Circus in East Oakland. There's a circus in Philadelphia that I just learned about. And because circus exists outside of your traditional performing arts centers and spaces, and they're not presented in these spaces, most of the circus that is presented in these spaces are European. They're not from the States. So those communities aren't even looking to be presented. They find ways to exist, to keep training. So it took a lot of excavation to find these artists. And it was important to me to have artists that were born on this soil. We were invited to London through the Manchester International Festival, that's now called Factory International. They invited me to come to London to have a workshop. We worked with about 5 or 7 artists in London, Black artists in London, and that was not it. They were very different culturally, and that surprised me, just how the vocabulary in their body was very different than artists that I had worked with in workshops, Adesla and I in workshops in New York. And part of it is the English on top of wherever they're from. If they're from, there's an artist that was from Nevis, one is Trinidadian, Ghanaian, Nigerian, but there's something about the being proper and being English and that culture that is on top of their own culture that made it a bit of a challenge for them to access the work.
And also probably different lived experiences to a certain
Absolutely.
extent, right?
Absolutely.
If you're really getting, it's a different lived experience.
Absolutely. And a distinction that I like to make is we had another residency. We were invited to Toulouse, France, and there's a residency space there. We worked with artists from, there's a acrobat Tangiers from Tangiers, Morocco, and an artist from Brazil. She's Brazilian Japanese. They got right into it. There was no barrier. It was fascinating.
That is fascinating.
It was fascinating.
So we're talking about the movement. So let's
So I
talk.
blame it on the English. Hope there's no English people in here.
Right, it's specific. That's interesting. And then, so how did you find the artists then that you're working with as you were like meeting people all over the world and trying a residency here and a residency there. How did you land on your current cast?
That was a Herculean task. One of the approaches that we took, we have an open source database. I was speaking with friends and colleagues from Seven Fingers, which is one of my favorite companies from Montreal.
Started in Pickle Family Circus.
Started
yeah.
Pickle Family Circus in San Francisco, that's right. And Bindlestiff Family Circus, which is also another incredible Hudson and New York-based circus company. And these are artists that I had worked with before, but were not people of color. However, they do know people because they're out there. And so I was getting names. Look at this person's Instagram, or let me text you this person. I'll email you this. So I had names and people from all communication sources. So I received a grant and I was able to hire someone to support me in creating this open source database. And so we received names from all over. And from that database, we had a call out actually this time last year. And that's how I got my
It's
cast.
a year? Oh, it's just a year?
Yes.
Wow.
This time last year, we had a 4-day workshop at BAM, and we had about 15 artists that came. 4 of those artists are in the show now. And the last 3, we, through word of mouth, people know people. The last 3 came to us in, 1 in November, the last 2 in January of this year. So 2 weeks before we
Amazing.
premiered.
Wow, 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 wow. The teeth biter there, right? So you have, I can't believe that blows my mind that was just a year ago that you started that. So that means 2018, this idea, you started doing it. So now here we are in 2025, right? So that's 8 years in the making.
Yes.
From idea, and maybe even a little bit longer, from idea
From idea,
to
yes.
starting to do this. So 8 years it's taken. Incredible. Okay, so now we're here. You've gone into some movement workshops. You're developing the vernacular and the vocabulary. Talk to me about the music and particularly how that fits into this work.
Yeah, the music is integral. As I said in the work, music is medicine. And I say that from a place, definitely Black music as medicine. But I've always had a love for sacred music. And sacred music for me is not religious music, but music that moves you. So you can look at Gregorian chants is sacred music. It's beautiful. You look at the singing from the Berbers and the Moroccan artists, the way they clap their hands, the way you look at Irish. I mean, sacred music is around the world.
House music.
House music all night long. Absolutely, is sacred music. And so that was important for me of what is it about music that comes from African Americans in this country that is so universal. You know, you could go to a remote village in Thailand and they know who Michael Jackson is, you know, or name that artist. So I did a lot of research around that, you know, how music lands in the body. What is humming? What does humming do to you in the body? What does snapping do? What about clapping? Because the drum was outlawed in this country. So it was illegal to play the drum. So how do you find a percussive expression is through the ham bone, through clapping, snapping, tap dance. And so I did research on that as well as how did artists and humans in this country find a way when you are away from labor and you're looking to source some joy, then what is your access to that? And oftentimes it was not with instruments, but just using the body. So I did a lot of research around that as well.
Okay. Do you want to talk a bit about what music you found? You want to talk about your playlist?
Well, I do have and I'm happy to share it as well. I do have a Spotify scratch list that I've been building over the years. Like I just started it to really help the musicians that I was talking to about what what I was thinking, and I call it a scratch track, that's a term that is in film. And I learned that filmmakers, when people, musicians who are scoring a film, they'll make a scratch track, what they call a scratch track first, to give to the film.
draft. A
Yes,
draft. This is
yeah,
the
this is what
idea.
I'm thinking. These are
Yeah.
ideas. And so that's what the Spotify playlist, and I keep building on it, keep building. So there's some music that's in the Spotify playlist that is in the show. We wanted to.
What's the name of your playlist so everybody can find it on Spotify?
Cirque Noir. Yes, Cirque Noir. And the music that's in the show spans from the blues to hip hop to funk. Um, it's across time, right? We needed to have a range of genres to really show the evolution of time, so that time the music gives you a sense of time. So we're using music also to move the story forward. And one thing that our music supervisor, Corey, came up with, I said, what if we did like a radio dial to show us like it can move time back and forth? So we have some cool radio dials. You can get a snippet of music that gives you a sense of time.
Where we are in time. Yeah.
Right, and then where you were at that time as well, and then full tracks of music as well. Yeah.
Sounds like fun. Okay, so then the design. So when we talked about music, we talked about the movement. Let's talk about design. You know, you're actually talking about the dials are one thing. Are there other elements within the design, whether it be costume, whether it be scenic, whether it be lighting, that are a part of this dramaturgical sort of layering?
Definitely the lighting has a big part in moving the show and the story forward. With circus, you need a bare stage. You can't have a lot of stuff on stage with circus. Or it depends on the circus, obviously. We've seen circus that
Has
whether it's
contraptions and
yeah,
sets,
right. So you
yeah.
have your apparatus, but in terms of a sofa or or a living room, it has to be kind of modular. And as we were building the show, building the plane and flying it at the same time, I didn't want to put too much focus on the design element visually.
You want it to be nimble.
Right. And we actually had, there is a designer that is on hold that was creating some visuals. So I wanted to look at some iconic photos, maybe some newspaper clippings to help us give a sense of where we are in time. And we just didn't have enough time to get that into the show. So perhaps for 2026, we'll have that in
Still
that layer
developing,
in the
yeah,
show,
yeah.
because we are definitely still layering and developing the show.
And that brings me to space, right? So you have talked about the American-based companies that are particularly African-American, but they're really operating outside of these traditional presenting spaces. They're operating in neighborhoods. So talk about place making. They're in very specific spaces, serving a particular neighborhood or community. But you've definitely built Minty Fresh to operate in these kinds of spaces, proscenium, spaces where traditional, I'll just use the language, high arts have been presented, theater, dance, music, and you want Minty Fresh to be in these kinds of spaces. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the artists are so thankful and kind of blown away with the green room. I mean, seriously,
speak
they're
on the fact that
performing
they've
in
not
tents, and
ever- yeah.
I don't disparage tents at all. However, the way circus is presented in this country is limited. So in other countries, it's presented in the opera house and in a tent. It's presented in a park and in a cabaret venue where there's liquor and all kinds of things going on.
And so for your artists, many of whom have probably not been in a space such as this.
Ever.
Having been on the stage, this is their first time doing that.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes,
Yeah. So
yes.
can you share some experiences that they're having with travel? Because you've been at the Kennedy Center.
Yes.
You've been in Philly. Yeah.
Yes.
So for someone's first performance to be the Kennedy Center, who's like never performed on a stage before, I mean, that's can't be beat, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's two things about this incredible cast. One that I'd like to share. One is this is their first time performing in a black circus. They've only been in white spaces. So that was a lot of conversation that we needed to take time to kind of unlock any trauma, talk about experiences, what does it mean to be in this space. So I've learned a lot also from them. I've learned a lot because I don't know that world. I don't know the traveling tent circus world. And what does that require? How much do you rehearse? How do you build a show with that kind of work? So I'm coming from a theater lens, and certainly a theater lens that is non-traditional, certainly a theater lens that can be experimental and all of the things, but it's still proscenium. You know, it still has those elements. And this is my world. This is the world that I love, and I want the audiences to have the experience of this kind of art form. Often there's not a lot of crossover. So the audience that will come to a proscenium theater may not ever go to
Circus tent.
a circus tent, you know, unless it's Cirque du Soleil, right? And there's a lot between a Flynn Creek theater or a shoestring theater. Those are both two touring circus tent companies than seeing a show at BAM or the beautiful spaces here.
Or the Mirage in Vegas. It's very different. It's a big wide
Very
range.
different,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. So I am committed to, because I've also presented so many circus artists from around the world and around the country in these spaces, and the audience is always blown away, always blown away. So I feel that there is a lot more opportunity to introduce this genre in these spaces. Recently, I was in San Francisco, and there's a show there called Dear San Francisco by the Seven Fingers Company at Club Fugazi. And David Dower is the artistic director and producer of that project, who has left Arts Emerson and now in San Francisco. And David is a huge advocate for circus. So a lot of the circus that we see now is because of his advocacy. So he's definitely a colleague, friend, mentor. And when I saw him and we embraced, he says, "Isn't it wonderful that we get to present this kind of work that brings so much joy at this time?" And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I could not have predicted that Minty Fresh would come online. Our first day of rehearsal in Philadelphia was January 20th.
Of this year, yeah.
Who could have timed that? Philadelphia is the city that Harriet Araminta Tubman gained her freedom after traveling back and forth 13 times to the northern shore of Maryland. I couldn't have timed that. I couldn't have, you know, the presenter came to our residency at Jacob's Pillow. Jacob's Pillow, we had a beautiful residency at Jacob's Pillow. And Mark Balin drove from Philly to Massachusetts to see our presentation from our week-long residency there. And he said, "I don't know where it's going, but I want to be the one to present it." And he happened to be a presenter in Philadelphia. So it was moving for me to have this work being presented in the state and the city where our
Yeah, it sounds like
muse.
all these things were conspiring over the many years
Yes.
just to get you to
Right.
that one, moment. Like it's all meant to be. You had mentioned sort of you had talked a little bit about your artists and sort of having these conversations around why being in Minty Fresh, what has been maybe transformative, right? So that it is significantly different for them to perform with Minty Fresh than with, say, a Cirque du Soleil or any of the other, you name it, touring circuses around the world. Is there anything you feel like you can share about some of those conversations? It doesn't, not attributed to anyone particularly, but if there was something that you feel is important to say and why the performers feel particularly held in a different way?
We had a Q&A in Philadelphia. There's a school, Circadium, beautiful circus school, one of the few accredited circus schools in the country. And we had our rehearsals at Circadium. And the owner and founder, Shayna, said, Monique, I believe in your project. I am not going to charge you one dime
Another angel, yes, yeah.
to rehearse for 2 weeks in that space. The only thing I ask is, can you have a Q&A with our students, with your cast? And that Q&A conversation was so transformative to hear from those students their questions. And one of the comments that one of the students said, I've been watching you all week and you just seem like you're having so much fun. You seem like you're having so much joy. And when we're to be training in circus, and what we're taught is to focus on technique, 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 technique. Yes, you have to have that technique, that wonderful technique. That's what makes circus so exciting, is the high level of technique. However, what's inside of that? What informs that? What is wrapped around that? What is the story that you're telling? And that is something that then the artists kind of shared their experiences in other circus, not to disparage any other circus, but how their culture was not allowed a full expression, right?
Sure.
Because you're hired to be a juggler, or you're hired to be that, whatever your particular
Skill
form is and your skill is. So to bring in the cultural perspective was something that they were all very appreciative of. And the response to the student was really informative for me to hear how joy is so important, and they feel that this is a project where they can let that out even more, right? Yeah, that's one experience.
That's making me think a lot about then your artists, what they're saying is they're being able to bring their full selves into the space, right? So that they have their technique, but now they get to bring their culture, which is then feels more reflective to themselves. So it's making me think about, it's almost full circle, right? So it's your artists are starting to feel fully seen and fully present in the work that's bringing them joy, something they've trained for. And now for you, as someone who has spent many, many, many years working, let's just say, as the doula, as the architect, as the holder, creator of space, now you are also being seen as the artist and the creator of the work. Are you able to accept that now? Does that feel, can you say that now in a way that maybe you didn't in the past? But
Yeah.
like, do you feel like you've been able to do that?
It's a process, and it is a process to, one thing that Pam, who's the executive artistic director at Jacob's Pillow, we had a conversation, and she was like, I just find this so fascinating that you're able to kind of split. It's almost like it's two sides of my brain. Because of course I'm also the producer. I'm also
clearly
having
that.
to
Yeah.
produce.
Yeah.
And she said, as a producer, you have to be 10 steps ahead because you're always anticipating. As an artist, you have to be in the moment. And if you try to skip ahead, you're going to trip up and you're going to miss something, or you're going to rush something. And that has been the most challenging thing for me to do, is to turn off that producer, money, space, time, airline tickets, per diem, turn that off and really sink into. I mean, it's a new work. You have to immerse yourself in all of the ideas that you have, and you have to test your ideas. You have to really test them. One thing I do want to share with the cast, there was a piece in the project with a piece of music by Oscar Brown Jr. It's called Bid 'Em In. It's a famous piece, and it's a piece that takes place on an auction block. And every time, it's a poem, and every time we've done this piece, whether it was in London, whether it's with New York dancers, it's always been almost traumatic for them. You know, at one point with the dancers in New York, I said, just be, just be. Don't even move, just allow. They were sobbing. So look that piece of music up. Bid 'Em In. Bid, it's an auction. This cast from 24 to 30 pushed back. They said, we don't want to do this. It's too traumatic. We don't want to go back there. So we had a over hour-long conversation. There were tears. People shared different experiences that they've had that have been traumatic for them. And I did not want to let that piece go because it's so powerful, but I had to release it. I had to let it go. So we hear a little snip of it somewhere in the show. I won't tell you where, but I had to listen to that and listen to, she's giving us this.
The five.
One of the, one of the artists grew up in a very privileged, very wealthy white community. And she said, I was that kid. She says, first of all, the performing arts centers, when you do student shows, it's not very diverse often who gets those tickets. She said, so I was that student where we would see a show like Minty Fresh, and then on the bus back to the school, they would be chanting, bid 'em in, bid 'em in, bid 'em in. And that just broke my heart. Mm-hmm. And so I said, I have to find a way, because what I also love about circus is that it's rigorous. We don't get to see too much rigorous circus in this country. It's very happy, 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 slap, slap, slapstick. But the range of circus, there's a lot of beautiful, rigorous circus that's very moving. And I wanted to make sure that this Minty Fresh experience was balanced in that way. Mm-hmm. But I had to acquiesce in that moment.
Maybe it'll find a place in another work somehow, some way. Yeah. So the last question I'll have, and we can wrap, is what do you hope, to that point, what do you hope an audience of Minty Fresh walks away with?
I hope the audience walks away with curiosity to do further research, as we are in a time where books are being banned and folks are being erased from websites and so forth, that we really look at the history of this country and find some joy in what has been transcended, what has been transformed. And that's what I always look for in all of the work that I do, whether it's as a presenter or a curator or as an artist, is I'm looking for transformational experience for myself, for the audience, for the artist. How are you different from this process, from this 2 hours that we're here together, or from the process of making something? How are you different? So that's always what gives me the most satisfaction. And for the audiences that come to see Minty Fresh, you're going to see some beautiful, highly skilled, amazing Black and brown artists. So that is already going to be a beautiful experience. So that, and the music. There was a couple that came up to us in Philadelphia and said, where can we get the soundtrack? So I want people to also go back and listen to some music or go forward. You know, there's not all of the music there's contemporary music in the show as well. Not all of it is throwback music. So I want, I am hopeful, and what we've experienced, let me say it from that perspective as well, from the audiences that we have been blessed with so far, to be moved and to find joy in being together in community. There's still joy to be had.
Saturday night at 8 and
Yes.
Sunday at 2 at the
Yes.
University Theater. Circus is coming to town.
Yes, joy, joy, joy.
Yeah, let's do a round of applause for Monique Martin and Minty Fresh.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gypsy Garcia. I am a board member with the International Festival of Arts and Ideas, and I'm co-chair of the Special Events Committee. Thank you, Jennifer, for leading us through that conversation. Monique, your journey through life is inspiring, and your work speaks for itself. We are so honored to present you with our 15th Anniversary Visionary Leadership Award. If you can hold it up, show it off. So this award, it was custom made by an artist named William Chills through a local nonprofit called Make Haven, which is a membership-driven organization serving as a gathering place and workshop for makers, creators, tinkerers, and dreamers. Thank you to everyone for joining us to honor Monique and celebrate her work. Please join me in another round of applause.
The Call, a response from Monique Martin and the Minty Fresh Circus. Monique Martin created in Minty Fresh Circus an answer to a call for those who have felt the longing for a home we cannot name, the yearning for a way we cannot find, a response to a question we cannot answer. Where do I belong? We are so lost in the shuffle, we cannot move, tugged in two directions, pulled towards a whisper, a hint of heritage, too rich to conceptualize, wrapped in royalty, but handed down in rags. We claim kings we cannot name, while standing in the quicksand of this land, softened by our blood, our ashes, overgrown roots, too firmly entrenched to be left behind or forgotten. You see, strange fruit fed us, and yet the internet would have us forget, question the existence, the resistance, the resilience of those who came before. And then Minty Fresh Circus asked an even better question. What does freedom feel and sound like if your only access to it is through your imagination? And through James Baldwin, they found the cure when he said, music is our witness and our ally. The beat is the confession which recognizes, changes, and conquers time. Then history becomes a garment we can wear and share, and not a cloak in which to hide. And time becomes a friend. And through this circus, we hear music when it says, I remember the way home, the village, the block, the fight, the loss, the yearning, the desire, the love. I remember the fire from the riots and the hunts. I was there with Harriet navigating the stars. I was there on the plantation. I soothed those babies and thumped those Bibles. Through this circus, we hear music when it says, I remember the marches of bands and militia, percussion of feet on pavement in Montgomery and Ferguson, passed down hand claps, tapped on toes, my mama, your mama live across the street. Through this circus, we hear music when it says, I remember you were not alone. I remember when we called out to God in defiance of the darkness, this little light of mine. Music said, didn't we wail under the Holy Ghost come down like a blanket over congregations wild to be seen, to be heard crying, deliver us? Through this circus, we hear music when it says, I remember sweat on brow, on chest, on hips, moving, 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 taking back the narrative, taking back the joy, taking back the freedom. Rename survival into healing, reclaim escape as genius, change it black, change it brown, transform it from magical into law. That we are not hidden, we are covered. We are not forgotten, we are befriended and beloved. Change it black, change it brown, reimagine it in chocolate-covered joy. Call it into the void and be answered by the ancestors. Change it black, change it brown. Turn power into a portal and pull these shores together. Bring us home, we cry. And music says, I'll take you. Bring us home, we cry. And the Minty Fresh Circus says, I'll carry you. Bring us home, we cry. And Monique Martin says, welcome home.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was beautiful, powerful.